A lot of us feel trapped and we feel boxed in because we've been told that there are only certain ways to do things. And so giving ourselves the freedom to imagine new realities, that's what every entrepreneur in the world has ever done.
I'm Amy Porterfield, ex-corporate girl turned CEO of a multi-seven-figure business. But it wasn't all that long ago that I lacked the confidence, the budget, and the time to focus on growing my small but mighty business. Fast forward past many failed attempts and lessons learned, and you'll see the business I have today. One that changes lives and gives me more freedom than I ever thought possible. One that used to only exist as a daydream. I created the Online Marketing Made Easy podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're an ambitious entrepreneur or one in the making who's looking to create a business that makes an impact and a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Hey there, welcome back to Online Marketing Made Easy. Today, we are not talking about marketing strategies. We're not talking about webinars, funnels, email marketing, social media, and do not click that button to go to another episode or another podcast. Stay with me for a second, because we are talking about something so important, more important than all of that, and that is our relationships, but specifically how to navigate tough relationships in tough situations. And this is going to be so applicable to business, but also to your personal life. And dare I say that business is personal. Like, people say it's not, I say it is. And so this conversation is incredibly important. And I'm so glad to be having it with my friend who I've been friends with for years and years now, Brit Barron. So Brit is a captivating speaker, author, and a coach who has mastered the art of using personal stories to inspire, entertain, and educate. So whether she's talking about navigating change, embracing your authentic self, or finding humor in life's challenges, which she's really good at for the record, Brit has a way of leaving a lasting impact. So the reason I wanted Brit to come on here is, one, I know her personally, and when I interview her, you'll hear me say like how this conversation around relationships actually got started between the two of us. And also, she recently released a book. It's called Do You Still Talk to Grandma? I'll let her explain why she named it that. But essentially, the book invites us into a conversation about relationships and accountability, sharing from her personal experience and the challenges that she's encountered along the way. And I have definitely, like everybody, I've had to navigate hard relationships. I definitely have in my personal life, but I hate to admit, because I just don't think people talk about this, I have in my business life as well. I've had relationships that have turned out to be very tricky. I've had relationships that haven't actually weathered the test of time. I've had relationships where I've wanted to have the hard conversations and they haven't, and I don't know what to do about that. And so I feel really hopeful about this conversation and about this new book that Brit wrote, because I think so many of us can learn from it and grow from it. So I won't make you wait any longer. Let's jump in. Well, hey there, Brit. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. I have been looking forward to this conversation, although it creates a little anxiety for me, and we'll get into why that is. But back in 2021, you sent me a voice text and we were talking about an idea you had. And you said, I want to know what's on the other side of cancel culture. And to me, I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? Where are you going with that? What are you thinking? So take me back there and how this concept with you and how this whole idea came about, and where are you with it now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think back to 2021, which feels like forever ago and also yesterday, we were just at the height of sort of experiencing this new wave of what we know as cancel culture. And I think in 2020, as someone who worked a lot in the DEI space and is very concerned with justice and freedom, there were parts of it where you're like, okay, like I see how we got here and I see what this is doing. But then there was another part And this is when I started thinking about this project and working on it, where I thought, is this the best way to get to where we want to go? Like, is this going to help us get to true transformation and change and these things that I so desperately want? And so that's when I first started thinking about it. And I remember, yes, picking a couple friends and sending them voice notes and being like, wait, is there something here? Like, are we kind of all feeling this? Like, what do you think about it? And that was the beginning of 3 years of this project.
Okay, so share with me a little bit about what you've learned along the way, because we know cancel culture. We've seen it. Some of us have seen it personally with our friends. Some of us just see it online, and like, it's very scary. It creates a lot of emotion. I do business online, so when I see it, I internalize it and I'm like, whoa, what if that were me? And so this whole idea of cancel culture, but also what I see, Brit, more than anything, more than just cancel culture, is someone has a different opinion than mine. They believe something that I don't believe in or I think is wrong. And so what I'm seeing out there is you just cut off all ties. I'm not doing that, but I've seen other people. You cut off all ties, you don't talk to them, or you don't even want to be associated with them. And I'm assuming through your research and through this journey you've taken, you've seen that many times, right?
Yeah.
And what do you do about that?
That's how the book evolved, honestly. Because what started with just looking at sort of social media and cancel culture, I pretty quickly realized that one of the big issues we're experiencing is we have this experience online where I'm scrolling and I'm like, oh, Amy Porterfield said something I didn't like, click unfollow. And it's just done.
Yep.
But most of us are living in a world where it's not celebrities and influencers. It's our parents, it's our grandparents, it's our sisters, it's our partners, it's our best friends from college. And so we're having to figure out how to navigate, is it possible for me to have close relationships with people I disagree with? And I think the influence of cancel culture is telling us that that's not a reality. But what most of us are wanting, I mean, are we going to cancel every family member? And so how do we reorient ourselves to understand how to stay in and maintain relationships through disagreement? And that's where a lot of the work went.
Okay, so I love that question. How do we navigate this? Give me some tips, some strategies you've learned along the way, some insights around what do I do with all those feelings, emotions, thoughts that I have when somebody is literally saying things online that I do not agree with. I think it's dangerous. I think it's wrong, but they're a friend and I don't want to fully cut them out of my life. What do I need to do so that I don't cut them out of my life?
Yeah. So I think the question, there's a lot of questions we have to back up and get to.
Okay.
So I think one of the hard parts about this conversation is we immediately jump to, can I stay in contact with this person? Do I cut this person off? And I think that is like many questions down the road. And so being able to sit with people and not, so there's a lot of things at play. One is we have a tendency towards binary thinking, just as people. It's all in our storytelling. It's how we grew up. We grew up with stories that were simple. There's a good guy and a bad guy. You want the good guy to win. Some of us grew up in religious contexts or ideologies that tell us, here's all the things you need to know to be a good person, to be in the right side of the line. And part of the problem with binary thinking is we can convince ourselves that we exist fully on the right side of something. Mm-hmm. And so if we can exist fully on the right side of something, it means someone can exist fully on the wrong side of something. Yes. And so engaging with our own nuance and journeys of experience of life will help us cultivate empathy for the nuance and experiences for the people around us. Something that's really dangerous that I've noticed, that in my book, I call it progressive amnesia. A lot of us have gone on some kind of growth journey in understanding something, and then we conveniently forget a time before we knew it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, there are things that I have just recently learned and understood about the world and the way it works. And so to have people who are sitting in seats where I previously sat, I think there's a level of empathy for understanding how and why they could be there, and a level of openness to the fact that that journey might take time. I joke all the time. I'm like, it took me years to be okay with the fact that I was gay. So then when I come out to people and I'm like, within 5 minutes, if they're not immediately have the right answer, I'm like, wow, you're wrong. But I'm like, I was in therapy for 2 years being like, am I okay? And so as I tell my, super Christian parents, I'm like, it was a reminder to like give some some space and time. I think we're so quick to judge people who think things that we once thought.
Okay, I love that space and time, giving people space and time. And also, if you have someone close in your life, at the time that we're recording this, the election hasn't even happened. But obviously, there's a lot of polarization in the election right now. So let's just use that as an example. If you have someone really close in your life and they love Trump and you are absolutely against Trump, you would never in a million years vote for Trump, and your, let's say, brother is voting for Trump, and you aren't going to, well, you could. I actually know family members who literally don't talk over this topic, so it's the saddest thing ever. But I don't know if the brother needs space and time to change his mind. It's not like someone could be like, my brother's voting for Trump, but I'm going to give him some space and time, and hopefully he'll change his mind. What if he's never changing his mind, but you don't want to ruin your relationship with him? What's the work that you need to do?
Yep. So this is how I got the title of the book, actually.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, tell everyone the title of the book one more time. I mentioned it in the intro. And please explain what the heck that means.
Yes. So the title of the book, it's called Do You Still Talk to Grandma? When the Problematic People in Our Lives Are the Ones We Love. And the title came from a story that I tell in the book, which is how I started thinking about this. I was at dinner with a group of friends, and one of our friends had mentioned that her grandma voted for Trump. And another friend at the table sort of gasped and was like, do you still talk to her? And she was like, my Nana? And she was like, yeah, I do. And I was like, oh, we're canceling Nanas? We're, you know what I mean? We're there. And at the end of the day, I understand that there are many reasons why someone might go no contact with people in their family. And sometimes that is the right call. And I think there is a lot of work to be done in our own understanding of how we sit with nuance. And one of the things that's hard about family members, so it's your brother or it's your grandma, is it's not just their political belief. If you just have a celebrity and they're like, I'm endorsing Trump, and you're like, well, I'm going to stop doing your thing. It's simple. It's easy. Great. Fine. Whatever. But when you're like, oh, my grandma made me spaghetti every day after school. She picked me up. She snuck me cookies when my parents were looking. She was a soft place to land. She, was there for me. Came to all my softball games, whatever. And now holds this homophobic ideology that, so now we're wrestling with all these things. I think there's a lot of questions to ask ourselves in how we engage with that. So one thing that I say all the time in just relationships, period, if you are engaging in relationship with someone and the goal is to change them, it's not a real relationship, right? So if you're saying, okay, I'm going to be a political missionary at Thanksgiving, I don't think anyone is going to have a good Thanksgiving. And so there is some work that you need to do on deciding whether or not the strength of the relationship and the love that you have for this person can hold this gap that exists between ideologies and political beliefs. And sometimes that means, okay, we're not going to talk about it, or I'm going to skip out on this thing. But I think our tendency to want to be like, I'm going to bring all the right facts to the table and then it'll be an easy switch. I don't know that that's worked. And so you're right. It's not time and space. And I think something that came out of writing this book is also realizing how deeply humans want a sense of belonging. It's one of our core needs. And so as someone, I grew up very religious, and I have a lot of friends who still exist in that very religious space. And I'm always telling them this is so, done. These are all the reasons why you shouldn't do this. And a question that just sort of haunts me now as I think about it is the question of what would it cost this person to agree with me? Because change is always loss. All change is loss. And so as we think about some of these beliefs, they're not just tied to oh, I just believe this because I just love this person. It's, oh, my neighbors, my friends, my community, this is a part of who I am. And so yes, it's not often just that we pick something and run with it. They're tied to more of belonging. And can we account for that in the empathy that we have as we engage in those conversations?
It's funny you said empathy, because I was just thinking empathy or compassion. If we could understand, you're right, it's not just a decision, whether it's who you're voting for or some other very big issue that you think is there's a right and a wrong and the other person is wrong, knowing that it is tied to so many other things than just this is how I think just because. Mm-hmm. So having that empathy or compassion around that, I think, is so incredibly important. But, I was thinking as you were talking, I know, and you talk about this in the book, I know that your parents went through a divorce. And the wild thing is, when I was reading about your book and the stories you were telling in it, I feel like, Brit, that was yesterday. Like, I knew you when this happened. That is so crazy that it was not yesterday. But I love that you wrote about something that was very recent for you. And I don't want you to give it all away, and I want people to read your book, but can you talk a little bit about that experience and how what you've learned about navigating hard conversations and hard relationships, how did that show up for you? What did you do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was an example for me. So my parents got divorced during the pandemic, and this was at the time they'd been together for 40 years. So
40 years.
At a certain point, you kind of think like, oh, that's probably not going to be a thing that I'm going to experience, right? I'm like, I'm old, I'm already married. Like I think that ship has sailed of like going through a parental divorce. And so I think it was the difficult thing for me is that these were people who I loved and idolized in a certain way and had impacted me in such a deep and profound way. And I have so much respect for and so much love for. And then all of a sudden I'm experiencing like massive disappointment, like deep, deep disappointment. And I'm hearing conversations and I'm seeing them in different lights. And it's like so human, like so very human. And so then I have this moment where I'm like, well, what do I do when both deep love and deep disappointment exist? And so what I need to be true is like, I need some space. I need different kind of boundaries in this season. I need different kind of approach to these relationships, but I still want these relationships. I still want relationships. There's still the deep love. There's still deep impact. And I think it's hard to hold both things. Most of us feel that way about our parents. Like they're people we love and they're real people who have, ways that they've disappointed us. Like we feel that about our partners. We feel that about all these things. Like, and I think it's so deeply unfair to create a world in which we hold certain people in certain lights, be it a parent, an influencer, a celebrity, where all of a sudden now anything that they've said, the work that we've gathered from them, the ways, it all hinges on this one disappointment. And so being able to hold both hands and saying, oh, deep love and deep disappointment, they don't even cancel each other out. They actually both just exist, and that's my work to hold. It was very helpful, especially as I dove into this topic.
I think a lot about this concept of doing the work, and I work with a therapist and I work through all the issues that come up in my business and my personal life. And she talks a lot about, okay, so you got to do the work. And I remember one time I said to her, what does that even mean? Like, what do you mean do the work? And I needed a project plan. I needed an action item to be put in a sauna so that I could work through it. Because I just didn't understand that concept. But right now, when you just said, there's two things I heard. One is, if something like that were to happen to you, and it happens to all of us, disappointing situations with family members and friends, you first have to make the decision, do you want to keep this person in your life? And you said sometimes having that distance and no contact is essential, but in many cases, it doesn't have to go down that road. So first making that decision, yes, I do want this person in my life. And then how you said, I had to learn how to balance or navigate deep disappointment and deep love at the same time. That's the work to me right there. Like, and that is not easy.
It's not easy, but I think that's so much of our work with others. But, you can't give what you don't have, right? And something I talk about and I believe in is pick an issue, right? For me, it might be like conservative evangelicalism, right? And there's a part of me that just it's so easy to jump on sort of like a hate train. And whenever I am so consciously aware that that's because part of me still hates that version of myself. So like if I can't hold the nuance that exists in my own life and story, then I'll never be able to hold it for someone else. So if I think I am just this like super evolved, like I'm doing the work, I did the work, it was actually less work than other people, and I actually invented the work, then I can look around and be like, yeah, and that's why this person's wrong, and this was why this, and you don't deserve this. But if I know that the people who are, believing these things, saying these things, that I once sat there, and then if I can remember how comfortable it felt to be in that space where, a pastor was just like telling me everything I need to know, and I just got to blindly believe. And if I remember the safety that I felt in that community, if I can remember all of those things, I can hold that. Well, now I'm going to be able to hold it. I'm not a bad person, but I had believed things in the past that I would now say are really bad. You know what I mean? I have understood what it feels like to be in that situation. And something I'm like, I want liberation. Like, I'm about the work of justice and freedom, but I want it for all people. I don't just want it for some. And that means the people that are still trapped in the systems that I was part of too.
So true. You know, I was thinking, if we use that example, it's such an easy one and it's just happening right now. And if people listen to this a year from now, it won't even mean as much. But the difference, you know, Kamala voter and a Trump voter. And I use that example like the sister doesn't like Trump and the brother does. But that brother, he also might be having issues because she's not voting for Trump and she's voting for Kamala. And the reason I say that is you bring up empathy and compassion. He might also be making the decision, do I want her in my life? Like, we forget that the other person who has the other big belief might be having those same challenges we're having, just in a different way. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, this is an experience we're all having, right? Like, whatever side you're on. And I think there's a lot of things that lead to like our current political polarization is the gap is far wider than it's historically been, right? It's not,
yes,
you know, it's not Obama Romney where it was like, oh, you're voting for him, we're voting for him. You know, there's this.
It's like don't ask, don't tell kind of thing.
Yeah. And there's all these huge reasons why, and appropriately so. But I also know and you say like, oh, if you're hearing this for a year from now, what's so funny is that when they told me this book was going to be coming out in October, I was like, oh, that's so far from now. By then, we won't even be, you know, dealing with these issues. And it's so humorous. But I'm like, I don't know a single person in my life right now who doesn't have one family member, friend, or something that they just think is absolutely nuts for their political ideology.
Totally.
But is desperately looking for a way to be able to disagree and still love them. And the subtitle of the book, when the problematic people in our lives are the ones we love. I was on this podcast recently and someone was like, can you love the problem? Like, is that even a thing you should get to do? You know, and I'm like, well, it's not can or should. We just do. We love these people. This brother and sister that you're talking about.
Yeah.
They just love each other. You know what I mean? Like,
that's such a great point. It's just what it is. And so let's start dealing with how we're going to navigate this.
Yeah.
And these conversations, this is why when you told me you were writing the book, and then when the book was done, I thought, I don't even know a more important piece of work right now than something like this, because we are not talking about how to navigate it. We're just talking about how much we hate this person or that person, or we cut them out of their lives, but we're not even talking about what to do instead. So that's why I love this. And, you know, the people listening to this episode right now, they could absolutely take everything we're talking about and relate it back to their personal lives, things that have happened in their past. It doesn't even have anything to do with politics. It could have to do with a million other things, but navigating those relationships. But one thing I know for sure is the majority of people listening right now are building businesses. They are soon to be entrepreneurs, or they are entrepreneurs. And a lot of them are doing something different from what their friends and family are doing. So I want to talk a little bit about how can they navigate people close to them who doubt their vision, who challenge their ideas. And Brit, this is a big one for my audience because I attract a lot of women. Their husbands want them to keep this a hobby. They don't want their wives to go out and build businesses and take time away from the kids and the family. So some of them, their husbands are not supporting them. Or to give credit to the men that listen, sometimes their wives are like, can you please just stay in that 9-to-5 job? This is so reckless. This is so scary. What do the entrepreneurs listening here today, how do they navigate those relationships?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, you know, our entire life and the way we understand how the world works exists in the landscape of the stories that we tell, the stories that we hear, the stories that we've been told. And then we assign value to certain things based on those stories. So if you've been told stories that, okay, the 9-to-5 is just, it's the most successful, it's the most permanent, it's the best. This is how to do things. This is A plus B equals C, which what I'm constantly proposing in this book and my whole life is that the rules aren't real, right? And so maybe people tell you like, oh, if this person votes like this, then you actually can't have a relationship, or you can't go out on your own and have your own business, or you can't leave a 9 to 5 for something that is less secure, and you can't have all these things. But the reality is you can. And I think something I talk about in relation to understanding how we exist in the world is learning the difference between power and authority. So there are real systems and people in power, and there are real power dynamics, but authority is something different. And authority is something that no one can have over you. You give or you don't, right? And so all the people who I, admire in history understood that they were under their own authority. So here's like an easy example, like someone like Harriet Tubman, right? She didn't go up to like, the city councilor and be like, excuse me, sir, like, might I have a permission slip to take some, enslaved people to freedom? Like, she was like, okay, this is the power structure, but I'm actually my own person. And so I'm going to take my own personal authority and do what I believe is right. And so we exist in these power structures that tell us this is the way to do business. This is the only way to make money. A 9 to 5 is the most secure way. And then we have people who have also consumed those stories. So it's really important for us to feel the personal authority that we all have as people to say, yes, I hear you. And I know that that's the story you've been told. And I'm going to choose to act my own authority. And I believe that the freedom I'll experience and the life I'll experience and what the idea that I have, the business I'm building, I believe in it enough to show you and remind you that those rules were never real. And I'm always like, if you can do that in one area, you can do it in any area. You know what I mean? If you do it in business, then you do it in relationships. You do it in relationships, then you can do it in parenting. If you can do it in parenting, then you can do it, you know what I mean? If you can realize that one barrier you thought was real wasn't, well, now are any of them?
I mean, so true. Everything you're talking about can be related to everything that we deal with, for sure. And when you were talking about the power versus authority, a thought that came into my mind, was it authority? Did I say that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One thing that came to my mind was that a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, this doesn't ever get talked about. So I'm so glad we're going to talk about it here. Disagreements with other people in business. And I don't know why. Well, it doesn't get talked a lot about because no one wants to name names out of respect. They don't want to air their dirty laundry. But I will tell you that I have lost some friends, business friends, either mistakes I've made or things that they have done to me. And some of them, there's not many, but I literally do not talk to this one person anymore. And I don't think that needed to happen. So talk to me about navigating business relationships, because business relationships are very different than personal relationships.
Yep.
And so how do you keep them intact after having a disagreement or after they do something that you feel like is not right? How do you keep that relationship intact?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, we need to get a lot better and get a lot more reps in of having difficult conversations, of having conversations that with topics that we disagree on, and also it being okay if it's not resolved by the end of that conversation and coming back to the table. And that's something I think a lot of us struggle with. I have people in my life, and business, for some reason, when we talk about it, it seems like it would be less personal, but I think everyone probably listening to this knows it's like somehow way more personal.
So personal, yes.
Like, you could talk about me all you want. Talk about my business. Now we have a problem. It's like this is my baby. Like this is the thing I built. So if you're critiquing my baby now, like you're calling my baby ugly, like we're gonna have a problem.
You're gonna have a problem.
And so I think knowing the sensitivity around it, I think almost every relationship, business, personal, is 10 difficult conversations away from where you want it to be.
That's profound to me, because to me, like when I get in a fight with Hobie, I have to have it resolved right in the moment, which we have gone to therapy about this because that does not work all the time. So I want it resolved. I don't want to worry about it. I don't want to think about it. So let's have this hard conversation. I'm willing to have every hard conversation needed, but I want to just have it right now and get it all over with. And that does not happen. So I love that you said it could be 10 hard conversations away from actually getting to a place that you can resolve it. What do you do if someone refuses? My situation was the person I don't talk to anymore, they just didn't want to have the hard conversation. Like I will have them all day long if I have to. but they didn't. So now how do I reconcile that? Because I feel very like I have no control over it. I feel like it's unfinished. I feel bad about it.
Well, I think that's the difficult part is everything can be 10 hard conversations away, but everyone in that conversation has to be in the conversation.
Yeah.
And truly in it. And I think what you're talking about is something that probably happens a lot when you have to move on without any reconciliation of that conversation. Because at the end of the day, you can't force anyone's hand. You can sit at the table as long as you need to with someone who's willing to sit at the table with you. And I think if they're not, then that gets really difficult. And then you have to like, as hard as it is, I feel like I'm constantly telling people, no matter the situation, the reality is you will probably have to be the bigger person. In your business, at the Thanksgiving table, at, you know, in a conversation with your partner, like if you have on that lens that, okay, this is the reality and I am going to be this person, then I think then the work becomes on you. Okay, this person's not willing to sit at the table, but what I need to do is make sure that I don't take this into the next conversation with me.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, even though that's not resolved, I need to not be like, oh, shoot, okay, now I'm just going to approach everyone as if they're going to act like that person. And that goes back to us doing our own work.
It's so true. It's so true. If someone's listening right now and they tend not to have the hard conversations, they tend to want to kind of, you know, sneak around them, do a little bit of chatter about it and then get out, and just like dread having the hard, awkward, no fun conversations. What advice would you give them to start opening up their heart and mind to actually have those conversations?
I would say sometimes we have to get curious and look back at our own lives and situations, people we admire, and almost always an hour's worth of difficult conversation can save you years worth of bad patterns and bad habits. And so I think the hard conversations save us from hard seasons a lot of the time. And you have to find that value. And I think something that is one of the reasons that we don't like to get into hard conversations is because if we feel like if someone is critiquing an element of our business or something we did, then it's us, right? That we are unable to separate, to hear that critique and say, oh, okay, well, the way you lead meetings kind of makes it feel like this. Like, I kind of wish you do that. Then what is being said is there's room for growth in the way you lead meetings. What a lot of us hear is not only are you terrible, but you're also not pretty and no one likes you.
So true. I could go there so fast, Brit. I'm embarrassed to admit it. I take way too much personal. I take it very personal, a lot.
This is like language I'll use sometimes. If I feel like I'm having a conversation with someone and I feel all of their, like, them be very activated.
Yeah.
I do like to pause and say, okay, here's what I feel like I said. What did you hear?
Oh, that is so good.
And sometimes, like, I will have said, like, hey, you know, I feel like you're moving really fast and I don't really feel like I was thought of in this decision. And, you know, as a, you know, business partner, this is really important to me. And this happened like a few weeks ago with my friend. And I was like, and they, like, I saw this, like, well, you, like, it got, and I was like, what did you hear? And they were like, that you don't like me and don't respect me. And I was like, oh.
That right there. What did you hear? This is what I think I said. What did you hear?
Yeah.
That's huge. You could use that in business. You could use that in your personal life, your relationships, your friendships. I'm going to hold on to that one because, yeah, with Hobie, a lot of the times I could see him getting really riled up, just his body language. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. Why would you get so upset right now? All I said was something that I think is really simple. But you're right. He heard something very dramatic based on his own stories and, you know, what's going on with him.
Yeah. And that's where we forget sometimes that, like, we're working with and talking to and, like, leading, like, real human beings.
Yeah.
Who just have a multitude of experiences.
Yes.
One of the things I joke about when we first got married and we were going through, like, our premarital counseling, and, you know, the person walking us through it was like, okay, money is, like, a huge thing. This is a huge issue in marriage. And I just kept, like, in my mind, I was like, it's just numbers on a screen. Like, it's numbers on a screen. Like, how much could this impact, you know, your marriage? Until you're like, I'm crying while we're making a budget. I'm like, why am I crying? It's numbers on a screen, but I'm so emotional about it. And all of a sudden I have, like, visions of my parents, like, with all the bills on the table. I mean, so it's never just numbers on the screen. It's almost never just feedback. It's never just like, you have to take into account like, okay, well, what did that bring up? What are you hearing? You know?
What are you hearing? I love that. I hope everybody uses that in their next hard conversation. I think that's so telling. And I love the word compassionate. It's so compassionate to say, this isn't just about me. We're in this together. So I want to care about what you're feeling about this, and I want to hear about it. And I think it makes me stop thinking about me and makes me think about the person I'm having the conversation with. So that's really powerful. Okay, so you've got this book. Again, what's the title of the book?
Do You Still Talk to Grandma?
And the subtitle?
When the Problematic People in Our Lives Are the Ones We Love.
And anyone listening right now, like, who did you write this book for? Why do you think this is so important? Why now? Like, give me a little bit of information here.
I wrote this book for anyone who is looking at the way we have conversations online and in person and wants a different approach. I wrote this book for anyone who is desperately trying to keep and hold on to relationships in their life with people they disagree with. And I wrote this for just anyone who wants to create more empathy and compassion in the way they lead and experience not only our social landscape, but in business and in relationships and across the board.
Amen to that. I think that everyone listening could be like, okay, you wrote the book for me then.
Yeah.
I think all of us, especially building businesses and navigating all those relationships. And when you have a business, your personal relationships get more complicated. There's just no way around it. So navigating all that, you're speaking to an audience that absolutely could benefit from this book. So where do they go? Do you have a special page, or do you want them to go to Amazon? Where do they go to get the book? Because at the time that this comes out, they can get the book.
Yes, you can get the book. Go to your favorite place to get books. It's available anywhere books are sold. So if it's not in your local bookstore, you can ask them to put it in stock.
There you go. We always like a little recommendation at the front desk of a bookstore.
Yes.
And here's my last question for you. What are your parting words? People listening right now, they're like, yeah, I get it. And I'm having those hard situations right now. I don't know what to do about it. And I do want a different way. Like, what is some advice? Obviously, they'll get a lot of advice from your book, but what can you say to them right now to give them a little bit of grace and reprieve?
I feel like the one thing I would say is to give ourselves a little space and room to reimagine the rules, to reimagine the way in which we interact with people, to imagine that there's another path, a third way, a different road, to imagine a different reality. I feel like a lot of us feel trapped and we feel boxed in because we've been told that there are only certain ways to do things. And so giving ourselves the freedom to imagine new realities, that's what every entrepreneur in the world has ever done, is to imagine that there's a different way to do something, and then to put it into practice. I think we can do the same thing in relationships. So it's okay to reject a lot of the social narratives around what you need to do, right? Everyone listening, you're entrepreneurs, you've already done that. And so let that sink into other areas of your life, and I think we'll be in a much better spot.
I think we will, absolutely. Brit, where can people find out more about you?
You can find me on the internet at britbarron.com, on Instagram at Brit Barron. And if you see me wandering down the street, say hi.
And you're coming to Nashville soon, so I will.
Yes, you will see me. Yes.
I'm excited to see you. Thank you so much, my friend. Love having you on the show, and thank you for having such an important conversation with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. I hope that this episode has encouraged you or given you courage to have the hard conversations. You know, I do a lot of things wrong and definitely struggle through some relationships. One thing I do feel really proud of is that I am absolutely willing to have the hard conversations. And I tell my friends all the time, if you have an issue with me, if I did something you don't like, if something's not sitting well with you, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about it. And one of the ways that I can stay in a hard conversation, I can instigate a hard conversation, I can sit with a hard conversation, is because I always tell myself, this person must really love me or respect me in order to show up in this hard conversation. And in turn, I love or respect this person enough to do that for them as well. And I love and respect myself enough to show up in those hard conversations because I know that they make me a better person. They make me more compassionate, empathetic. They make me stronger in my communication. And so I just telling you all of this to say, if you do shy away from those hard conversations, I hope this book and this conversation has encouraged you to have them or lean into them more if you already are having them. But also, I think all of us need to remember that they do make us better. And I think some of the tools in this book will help us navigate those hard conversations so we actually can get more of the outcome that we're looking for, or that we could deal with it if we don't. And I think that's important as well. Life is rough. Life is hard sometimes. Relationships are hard sometimes. And we have to have these conversations to remind each other we're not alone. You're not alone, my friend. I know that I'm not alone in this. And that gives me a little bit of peace as well. Thanks for listening. Make sure to go grab Brit's book because I think we all can get a lot of value from it. And I'm sending you so much love for your next hard conversation. You got this. Talk to you soon.